The crystal chandeliers of the Gangnam Palace restaurant cast dancing shadows across marble floors as Park Soo-jin pressed her hand against the small of her back, trying to ease the persistent ache that had followed her throughout Seoul. 7 months pregnant and halfway across the world from home, she wondered for the 100th time if attending this education conference alone had been a mistake. Her husband Michael's deployment had been extended another 3 months, and she'd convinced herself that the trip would be a welcome distraction. Now, surrounded by conversations in a language she barely understood despite her basic Korean lessons, she felt more alone than ever. She adjusted her navy maternity dress and made her way through the restaurant's main dining area, heading toward the restroom. The wealthy patrons barely glanced her way, their attention fixed on expensive plates of Hanwoo beef and bottles of wine that cost more than her monthly rent back in Atlanta. Soo-jin had stumbled into this place by accident, following her conference group for what was supposed to be a casual dinner, only to find they'd already left for another location. Too exhausted to search for them, she decided to grab something quick before returning to her hotel. That's when she heard it, a sound that every teacher recognizes instantly, the universal noise of a child in distress. At a private corner table, partially hidden by an ornate wooden screen, a little girl was clutching her throat. Her face had gone from pink to red to a terrifying shade of purple. The man across from her, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Soo-jin's car, was barking into his phone in rapid Korean, seemingly oblivious to his daughter's crisis. Around them, waiters stood frozen, their faces masks of panic, but no one moved. No one acted. Before we continue, please click the subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment. This lets us know you're following the story. Soo-jin didn't think, she ran. Her pregnant belly made her awkward, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She reached the little girl in seconds, her teacher training kicking in automatically. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her cheeks as she struggled for air. Soo-jin positioned herself behind the child, wrapped her arms around the small body, careful to avoid her own protruding stomach, and delivered a sharp upward thrust just below the ribcage. Nothing. The man had stopped talking, his phone lowering as he finally registered what was happening. His eyes, dark and sharp, fixed on Soo-jin with an expression she couldn't quite read. Shock, anger, fear. Soo-jin thrust again, harder this time, putting everything she had into it. The little girl's body jerked, and suddenly a piece of tteokbokki, sticky rice cake, flew from her mouth and skittered across the polished floor. The child gasped, a horrible wheezing sound that was the most beautiful thing Soo-jin had ever heard, and then she was coughing and crying and breathing. Soo-jin lowered her carefully into a chair, her own hands shaking now as the adrenaline began to fade. The little girl immediately reached for her, small fingers clutching at Soo-jin's dress, and Soo-jin instinctively pulled her close, stroking her hair and murmuring, "You're okay, sweetie. You're okay now. Just breathe." The restaurant had erupted into chaos. Waiters were rushing over, calling for a doctor, their earlier paralysis replaced by frantic activity. Other diners had stood up, craning their necks to see what had happened. And the man, the girl's father, just stood there, staring at Soo-jin with an expression that had hardened into something cold and unreadable. Finally, he spoke. His English was perfect, barely accented. That was unnecessary. Soo-jin blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet, extracting a black credit card. "How much do you want?" The question hit her like a slap. "I'm sorry, what?" "For your trouble." He gestured dismissively at his daughter, who was still clinging to Soo-jin, her small body trembling. "Name your price. I assume that's why you intervened so dramatically." Soo-jin felt heat rising in her chest, anger mixing with disbelief. She gently disentangled herself from the little girl and stood, meeting the man's gaze directly. "I didn't do it for money. Your daughter was choking. She could have died. My staff would have handled it." His tone was ice, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Not with attraction, but with dismissal, as if he were cataloging her worth and finding it wanting. His gaze lingered on her pregnant belly, then moved to her face, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Prejudice, thinly veiled. Perhaps where you come from, such theatrics are rewarded, but I prefer to handle family matters privately. The words hung in the air between them, their meaning crystal clear. Sujin had encountered racism before, subtle and not so subtle, but this man's disdain was particularly cutting because it came wrapped in expensive fabric and polite words. Appa, the little girl tugged at her father's sleeve, her voice hoarse from coughing. Appa, she saved me, the Ajama saved me. Haewon, that's enough. He switched to Korean, speaking sharply to his daughter, who immediately fell silent, her eyes dropping to the floor. But then Haewon looked up at Sujin and in English whispered, "Thank you." Sujin's heart melted. She knelt down, ignoring the father's disapproving stare, and smiled at the little girl. "You're very welcome, sweetheart. Just chew your food slowly next time, okay?" Haewon nodded solemnly, then surprised Sujin by throwing her small arms around her neck. The hug was brief but fierce, and when the girl pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. Kim Min-jun watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He wasn't accustomed to being wrong, and he certainly wasn't accustomed to being corrected by strangers. Especially not strangers who looked like this woman, with her obvious pregnancy, her off-the-rack dress, her complete lack of deference to his status. She should have been grateful for his offer of payment. Instead, she was looking at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "I should go," Sujin said, straightening up. The sudden movement made her dizzy, and she had to grip the back of Haewon's chair to steady herself. "Are you all right?" The question came from one of the waiters, not from Min-jun. "I'm fine, just tired." But as she said it, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, making her gasp. Her hand flew to her belly, and she felt the muscles there contract, hard as stone. Min-jun saw the change in her expression, and his own shifted, alarm replacing his cold indifference. "You're hurt." "No, I'm just..." Another contraction, stronger this time. "Not normal, too early. I need to sit down." She didn't remember deciding to sit, or feeling her legs give out, but suddenly she was on the floor, and the pain was everywhere, radiating from her stomach in waves that took her breath away. Through the haze, she heard Haewon crying, heard Min-jun barking orders in Korean, felt hands lifting her. "Don't move her," someone shouted in English. "Call an ambulance," another voice added. But Min-jun's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and authoritative. "My car, now, it will be faster." Sujin wanted to protest, wanted to say she didn't need help from a man who just insulted her, but another wave of pain stole her words. She felt herself being lifted, cradled against someone's chest, and then she was moving, the restaurant's lights blurring past her. The next few minutes were a confusion of sensations. The leather interior of an expensive car. Haewon's small hand clutching hers. Min-jun's voice on the phone, speaking rapid Korean, the words pregnant and American and emergency cutting through in English. The squeal of tires as the car accelerated. "Stay with me," Min-jun said, and she realized he was talking to her. His hand was on her shoulder, firm and surprisingly warm. "We're almost there." "My baby," Sujin managed to whisper. "Please, my baby." "The hospital is 2 minutes away. You're going to be fine, both of you." She wanted to believe him, but the fear was overwhelming. She was alone in a foreign country, going into premature labor, being rushed to a hospital by a man who clearly despised her. What had she been thinking, coming here? What kind of mother put herself in this situation? The car screeched to a stop, and suddenly there were doctors, nurses, a gurney. Sujin caught a glimpse of the hospital's exterior, gleaming glass and steel before she was rushed inside. Someone was asking her questions in English, and she tried to answer, tried to explain about the stress, the choking incident, the pain. "How many weeks?" a doctor asked. 28, almost 29. "Any complications in the pregnancy?" "No, everything, been normal, I shouldn't have." Her voice broke. A nurse took her hand, squeezed gently. "You're at Seoul National University Hospital. You're in excellent hands. Try to stay calm." They wheeled her into an examination room, and through the doorway she saw Min-jun standing in the hallway with Haewon. The little girl was crying, and her father had finally picked her up, holding her against his chest. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and Soo-jin saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for her, she realized, but for his daughter, who had just watched another traumatic event unfold. Then the door closed, and Soo-jin was alone with the medical team. The examination seemed to take hours, but was probably only minutes. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands, performed an ultrasound while explaining everything in careful English. Soo-jin watched the monitor, her heart in her throat, until she heard it. The rapid thump-thump-thump of her baby's heartbeat. "Strong heartbeat," the doctor said, smiling. "Baby looks good, but you're having Braxton Hicks contractions, very strong ones. The stress triggered them. You need complete bed rest for at least 48 hours, possibly longer." "But I'm supposed to fly home in 3 days." The doctor shook her head firmly. "No flying, not for at least a week, maybe 2. I want to monitor you. You're at risk for preterm labor if you don't rest." Soo-jin closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "I don't have anyone here. I don't know anyone in Seoul." "Do you have travel insurance?" "Yes, but..." The thought of navigating a foreign hospital system alone, of being stuck in a hotel room with no support, was overwhelming. There was a knock at the door, and a nurse poked her head in. "Dr. Choi, the gentleman outside, Kim Min-jun, he's asking about the patient. He says he'll cover all medical expenses." Soo-jin's eyes flew open. "What? No, I have insurance, I don't need." "He's quite insistent," the nurse said. "He's also asking if we have private recovery rooms available." Dr. Choi raised an eyebrow. "Kim Min-jun, the CEO." "Yes, ma'am." The doctor's expression shifted subtly, a mix of surprise and calculation. "I see. Well, that's very generous, but ultimately it's the patient's decision." Soo-jin wanted to refuse. Every fiber of her being screamed that accepting help from Min-jun would be a mistake. But the practical part of her brain, the part that knew she was vulnerable and alone and scared, whispered that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. "Can I speak to him?" she asked quietly. Dr. Choi nodded and stepped out. A moment later, Min-jun entered, and this time he was alone. Hae-won must have been left with someone in the waiting area. He stood at the foot of her bed, his hands in his pockets, his expression carefully neutral. "The baby?" he asked. "Fine, for now, but I need bed rest." "I heard." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "I owe you an apology." Soo-jin waited, not making it easy for him. "What I said in the restaurant was inexcusable. You saved my daughter's life, and I responded with contempt. There's no justification for that." The words came out stiff, rehearsed, but there was something genuine underneath them. "Allow me to make amends. I'll cover your medical expenses and arrange for a private room. You shouldn't be alone right now." "I have insurance." "Korean hospital bureaucracy can be complicated for foreigners. Let me handle it. Consider it payment for what you did for Hae-won." "I don't want payment." "Then consider it an apology." His jaw tightened. "I'm not good at those, as you've probably gathered, but I'm sincere." Soo-jin studied him, trying to see past the expensive suit and the carefully controlled expression. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care? 5 minutes after I saved your daughter, you couldn't wait to get rid of me." For the first time, she saw something crack in his facade. He looked away, toward the window, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter. "My wife died 3 years ago, suddenly. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone. I didn't get to say goodbye, didn't get to thank her for everything she'd given me." He looked back at Soo-jin. "When I saw Hae-won choking, I froze. I froze like a coward while my daughter was dying, and you, a stranger, saved her. I responded badly because I was ashamed." "That's not an excuse, just the truth." The admission hung between them, raw and honest in a way that surprised them both. "I'm sorry about your wife," Soo-jin said finally. "And I understand being scared, but that doesn't give you the right to judge people based on how they look or where they're from." "No, it doesn't." He met her gaze steadily. "I have many flaws, MS. I don't even know your name." "Park Soo-jin." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Park, that's..." "Korean, yes. My adoptive parents were Korean American. They gave me a Korean name when they brought me home from foster care." She saw understanding dawn in his eyes. So when you looked at me and saw someone you assumed was just looking for a handout, you were wrong in more ways than one. Minjun had the grace to look ashamed. I apologize again. Will you let me help? Not as payment, not as charity, but as one human being to another who made a terrible first impression and would like a chance to do better. Sujin wanted to say no, but she was tired, scared, and alone. And beneath his arrogance, she sensed he was genuinely trying. Okay, she said, but I'm keeping track of expenses. I'll pay you back. If that makes you comfortable. Dr. Choi returned then, breaking the tension. We're moving you to a private room on the 7th floor. You'll stay here for observation, at least 2 days, possibly longer. No stress, no exertion, just rest. As they wheeled Sujin out of the examination room, she caught sight of Haewon in the waiting area. The little girl's face lit up when she saw her, and she waved enthusiastically. Sujin waved back and found herself smiling despite everything. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. The private room was more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seoul skyline. There was a comfortable couch in addition to the hospital bed, and the bathroom had a walk-in shower with marble tiles. Sujin felt out of place in such luxury, but she had to admit it was better than a shared ward. A nurse helped her get settled, explaining how to use the call button and when to expect meals. Then she was alone, finally able to process everything that had happened. She reached for her phone to call Michael, then remembered the time difference. It would be the middle of the night at his base. She'd have to wait. Instead, she called her best friend, Keisha, who answered on the second ring. Girl, how, Seoul, are you having the best time? Sujin laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. Not exactly. As she recounted the day's events, she could hear Keisha's reactions ranging from shock to anger to concern. Wait, back up. This rich asshole tried to pay you off for saving his kid. Yes, but... And now you're in the hospital, and he's paying for everything. Keisha, I didn't have a choice. I'm stuck here alone and... I know, honey. I know, I'm just worried about you. This guy sounds like bad news. He apologized. I think he meant it. Hum. Keisha's skepticism was audible. Just be careful, okay? Rich people don't do things out of the goodness of their hearts. There's always a catch. They talked for another 20 minutes before Sujin's exhaustion caught up with her. After hanging up, she lay back against the pillows and closed her eyes, one hand on her belly. The baby was moving, little flutters that reassured her everything was okay. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, there was a soft knock at the door. Come in, she called groggily. The door opened, and Haewon peeked around it, her eyes wide and hopeful. Can I visit? Minjun appeared behind his daughter, looking apologetic. She insisted, if it's too much. No, it's fine. Sujin sat up, smoothing her hair self-consciously. Come in, Haewon. The little girl approached shyly, holding something behind her back. When she reached the bed, she produced a slightly crumpled drawing. It showed 3 stick figures, one small with pigtails, one tall with black hair and a round belly, and one smaller figure that appeared to be inside the belly. I drew you and your baby, Haewon explained in careful English, to say thank you. Sujin's throat tightened. This is beautiful, thank you so much. Is your baby okay? Yes, the baby's fine. I just need to rest. Haewon nodded seriously. My Appa says rest is very important. He also says I shouldn't bother you, but I wanted to make sure you were okay. You're not bothering me at all. In fact, you're making me feel much better. Minjun watched this exchange from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Sujin caught his eye and gestured to the chair beside her bed. You can sit down. You don't have to hover in the doorway like a bodyguard. He smiled slightly, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face. Force of habit. I'm not very good at hospitals. Bad memories. Your wife. He nodded, settling into the chair while Haewon climbed onto the couch and began pulling coloring books from a backpack. She collapsed at home. Brain aneurysm. By the time we got her here, it was too late. I spent 3 days in a waiting room much like this one, watching Haewon color pictures that her mother would never see. "I'm so sorry. That must have been unbearable." It was. He watched his daughter for a moment, something soft and vulnerable in his expression. She was only 6. She kept asking when Mommy was coming home, and I didn't know how to tell her that Mommy wasn't coming home, that she would never come home. Soojin's heart ached for them both. "How did you tell her?" "Badly," he laughed without humor. "I hired a child psychologist to do it. I couldn't find the words myself. What kind of father does that make me?" "A human one. Grief doesn't come with an instruction manual." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound Haewon's crayons scratching across paper. Then Minjun spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent 3 years trying to build walls around us, around Haewon especially. I thought if I could control everything, make enough money, hire the right people, create the perfect environment, then nothing bad could ever happen to us again. Today showed me how futile that is. All my money, all my power, and I couldn't save my own daughter from choking on rice cake. You did that with nothing but quick thinking and courage." "And training," Soojin pointed out. "I'm a teacher. We all learn the Heimlich maneuver. It's not about courage, it's about preparation." "Perhaps, but you didn't hesitate. That matters." Haewon interrupted their conversation by bringing over her latest drawing, this one showing Soojin in a hospital bed surrounded by hearts. "This is you getting better," she announced proudly. "It's perfect." Soojin smiled at her, then at Minjun. "You have an amazing daughter." "I know, though I don't deserve her." "Don't say that where she can hear you. Kids internalize everything." Spoken like a teacher. 3rd grade, Atlanta Public Schools. Or at least, I was until I went on maternity leave. 3rd grade, Minjun studied her with new interest. That's what 8-year-olds like Haewon. Exactly like Haewon. As if on cue, Haewon climbed into her father's lap. Something Soojin noticed he seemed surprised by but pleased. The little girl looked at Soojin seriously. "Will you be my teacher? Appa hired tutors, but they're boring." Minjun's cheeks colored slightly. "Haewon, that's not appropriate." "Why not?" Soojin laughed. "I'm not going anywhere for at least a few days. If you want to practice English, I'm happy to help." Haewon's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Appa, did you hear?" She said yes. "I heard, but Soojin needs to rest." "A little conversation isn't going to hurt me. In fact, it might be nice to have company." "See, Appa, she wants company." Minjun looked between them, clearly outmaneuvered, and sighed. "All right, but only if Soojin feels up to it and only for short visits. Deal." "Deal." Haewon scrambled off his lap and returned to her coloring, humming happily. Minjun leaned closer to Soojin and spoke quietly. "You don't have to do this. I know she can be overwhelming." "She reminds me of my students. Besides, I could use the distraction. Hospital rooms get boring fast." "Then I'll bring her by tomorrow, if you're sure." "I'm sure." He stood to leave, then paused. "Thank you for everything. For Haewon, for being gracious when I was awful for this. You didn't have to be kind to us." "Yes, I did," Soojin said simply. "That's what decent people do." After they left, Soojin lay back against her pillows and stared at Haewon's drawings, now taped to the wall where she could see them. Something had shifted in the past few hours, something she couldn't quite name. Minjun was still arrogant and clearly had issues with control and prejudice, but underneath that, she'd glimpsed someone wounded and trying, however imperfectly, to be better. And Haewon was just a lonely little girl who needed a mother figure, even temporarily. Soojin told herself she was just being kind, just being a teacher doing what teachers do. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just become tangled in something far more complicated than a simple good deed. The next morning brought Dr. Choi with good news and bad news. Good news, baby is doing great, no signs of distress. Bad news, your blood pressure is elevated and you're showing signs of exhaustion. I want you here at least 4 more days. 4 days turned into 5, then 6. Haewon visited every afternoon, sometimes with Minjun, sometimes with her nanny, a kind woman named Mrs. Song who spoke limited English, but communicated beautifully through smiles and gestures. The little girl would do her English homework with Soo-jin, practice reading, and tell elaborate stories about her school friends. On the third day, Soo-jin worked up the courage to ask, "Hae-won, do you miss your mom?" The little girl's face grew serious. She was quiet for a long moment, coloring carefully inside the lines of a butterfly's wings. "Sometimes I can't remember her face," she whispered. "Appa has pictures, but it's not the same. I remember she smelled like flowers and she sang to me at night, but I can't remember her face without looking at pictures. Does that make me bad?" "Oh, sweetie, no." Soo-jin's eyes welled up. "That doesn't make you bad at all. You were very young. Our memories fade, especially the visual ones. But the feeling memories, those stay forever. You remember how she made you feel, and that's what matters most." "She made me feel safe." Hae-won looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Like nothing bad could happen because Mommy was there. Appa tries, but he's always working. He's scared of me, I think." "Scared of you?" "Not scared like afraid. Scared like he doesn't know what to do. Mrs. Song says he loves me so much it makes him scared, because he doesn't want to mess up." Out of the mouths of babes, Soo-jin thought, "Your nanny is very wise." "She is, but I wish Appa wasn't scared. I wish he was just Appa." That evening, when Min-jun came to collect Hae-won, Soo-jin asked if she could speak to him privately. He sent Hae-won to the waiting area with Mrs. Song and closed the door. "Is everything all right?" Concern creased his forehead. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to talk to you about Hae-won." He stiffened. "If she's been bothering you." "She hasn't. She's wonderful. That's actually what I wanted to talk about." Soo-jin chose her words carefully. "She told me today that she thinks you're scared of her." Min-jun's face went pale. "She said that." "Not in a bad way. She understands you love her. But she feels the distance between you, and she's interpreting it as fear. She's 8 years old and she's trying to figure out why her father won't just be present with her." "I am present. I make sure she has everything she needs." "Except you." Soo-jin kept her voice gentle but firm. "Money and tutors and fancy schools aren't the same as having a father who sits with her at dinner, who asks about her day, who isn't always looking at his phone." Min-jun's jaw clenched. "You've known us less than a week." "I've been a teacher for 7 years. I know what kids look like when they're starving for attention from their parents. Hae-won is one of those kids." "How dare you?" He stopped, taking a visible breath to control his anger. "You don't understand what it's like to lose someone, to be terrified every moment that you'll lose someone else." "You're right, I don't understand that specific loss. But I understand loneliness. I grew up in foster care, remember? I know what it feels like to be in a room full of people and still feel completely alone. That's what Hae-won is experiencing right now." The anger drained from his face, replaced by something that looked like pain. He sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed. "What am I supposed to do? How do I fix this?" "Start small. Have dinner with her, just the two of you. No phones, no work. Ask her about school, really listen to her answers. Read her a bedtime story. Let her see that you're not going anywhere, that she doesn't have to be perfect or quiet or convenient to deserve your attention." "I don't know how to do that." "Yes, you do. You loved your wife, right? You spent time with her, made her feel special." "Of course." "Then you know how. You're just scared, like Hae-won said. But love isn't about avoiding fear, it's about choosing connection despite the fear." Min-jun was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "My wife would have liked you. She always said I needed someone to challenge me, to call me on my bullshit." "Sounds like she was smart." "She was. I didn't deserve her either." He stood, straightening his tie. "Thank you for caring about Hae-won, and for being honest even when it was difficult. That's what friends do." He paused at the door. "Are we friends now?" "I don't know. Are we?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "I'd like to be. I don't have many of those." After he left, Soo-jin realized she was smiling too. Somewhere in the past few days, without quite meaning to, she'd started to care about this strange, broken little family. It should have worried her, but instead, it felt right. The next afternoon, Min-jun arrived without Haewon but carrying a large box from a bookstore. "I thought you might be bored," he explained, setting it on her bed. "I wasn't sure what you liked to read, so I got a variety." Inside were at least 20 books, ranging from literary fiction to mysteries to memoirs. Soo-jin pulled them out one by one, touched by the thoughtfulness. "This is too much. You're stuck in a hospital room because of my family. It's the least I can do." "Still, thank you." She held up a book on Korean history. "I see you included some educational material." "You're in Korea. Might as well learn something." They fell into an easy conversation about books, which led to discussing movies, which somehow ended with them debating the merits of various Korean dramas that Min-jun claimed to never watch, but clearly had opinions about. "You're a closet K-drama fan," Soo-jin accused, laughing. "I am not. I simply have cultural awareness." "You just described the entire plot of Crash landing on you." "That's common knowledge." "Uh-huh." He stayed for 2 hours, longer than he probably intended, and when he finally left, Soo-jin realized she'd laughed more that afternoon than she had in months. There was something surprisingly easy about talking to Min-jun when his walls were down, when he wasn't performing the role of powerful CEO. Dr. Choi cleared her for discharge on the 7th day, with strict instructions to continue bed rest at her hotel. "No walking except to the bathroom, no stress, no travel for at least another week. Then we'll reevaluate." "I understand." Min-jun, who had been present for the discharge instructions, spoke up. "Actually, I have a proposal." Soo-jin looked at him warily. "What kind of proposal?" "My home has a guest house, separate from the main residence, completely private. It has everything you need, including a full kitchen. My housekeeper can prepare meals, Mrs. Song can check on you, and you'll be close by if anything goes wrong." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Before you say no, consider this. Your hotel room is small, you'd be alone, and you'd have to manage food delivery in a language you barely speak. This way, you have support without giving up independence." "Min-jun, I can't just move into your guest house." "Why not? It's sitting empty, and Haewon would love having you nearby. She's been asking when she can see you again." That last argument was what got her. Soo-jin had grown attached to the little girl too, and the thought of not seeing her for the next week or two felt wrong. Still, moving onto Min-jun's property felt like crossing a line. "What would people think?" she asked. "I don't care what people think, do you?" "I care about impropriety. You're a public figure and I'm. You're a woman who saved my daughter's life and is now stuck in a foreign country with no support system. Anyone who has a problem with me offering you a safe place to recover can answer to me." Dr. Choi, who had been listening to this exchange with barely concealed amusement, interjected. "For what it's worth, having someone check on you regularly would ease my mind considerably. Bed rest is easier said than done when you're alone." Soo-jin looked between them, realizing she was being tag-teamed. "This is not fair." "Life rarely is," Min-jun said. "But sometimes accepting help is the brave thing to do." That's how Soo-jin found herself, 3 hours later, being driven through the affluent hills of Seongbuk-dong in Min-jun's Merceds. The neighborhoods grew progressively more exclusive, the houses larger and set farther back from the road, until they turned through an imposing gate that opened onto a sprawling estate. The main house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to bring the surrounding gardens inside. But Min-jun directed the driver past it, following a stone path that wound through meticulously maintained grounds to a smaller structure tucked among cherry trees. "This is the guest house?" Soo-jin asked, staring at what was essentially a luxury cottage. "It was my wife's art studio," Min-jun explained, helping her out of the car carefully. "After she died, I had it converted into a guest suite. It's been empty since. I think she would like knowing it's being used to help someone." Inside, the space was beautiful and surprisingly warm. Large windows flooded the open-plan living area with natural light. The bedroom had a comfortable-looking bed piled with pillows, and the bathroom featured both a soaking tub and a walk-in shower. Everything was immaculately clean and thoughtfully arranged. "There's a panic button by the bed and another in the bathroom," Minjun pointed out. "Press either one and security will be here in under a minute. My housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, will bring meals 3 times a day unless you prefer to cook. The kitchen is fully stocked. Wi-Fi password is on the counter. If you need anything at all." "Minjun," Sujin touched his arm, stopping his nervous recitation. "This is more than I could have hoped for, thank you." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and something shifted in his expression. "You're welcome. I'll let you rest. Haewon will want to visit later if you're up for it." "I'm always up for Haewon." After he left, Sujin explored her temporary home, marveling at how her life had taken such an unexpected turn. A week ago, she'd been just another conference attendee, invisible and alone. Now she was living on a billionaire's estate, befriending his daughter, and somehow, impossibly, starting to see past his cold exterior to the grieving man underneath. She called Michael that evening, finally catching him during a break. "Baby, I have so much to tell you." "Is everything okay? The baby?" "Baby's fine, I'm fine, but I'm not coming home on schedule." She explained everything, watching her husband's face on the video call cycle through shock, anger, concern, and finally, reluctant acceptance. "This guy better be treating you right," Michael said firmly. "I don't care how much money he has. He's been surprisingly decent, and his daughter is adorable. You'd like her." "I'm glad you're not alone, but Sue, be careful. Rich people play by different rules." "I know, I'm being careful." After they hung up, Sujin settled into bed and tried to process everything. She should feel uncomfortable here, should feel like an outsider. Instead, she felt oddly at home, as if the universe had conspired to put her exactly where she needed to be. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mrs. Kim brought breakfast at 8, always with a warm smile and extra fruit because she'd noticed Sujin's preference. Haewon visited every afternoon after school, doing homework at Sujin's kitchen table and chattering about her day. Minjun stopped by most evenings, ostensibly to check on her well-being, but usually staying for dinner and conversation that stretched long into the night. "Tell me about teaching," he said one evening, watching her over glasses of herbal tea. "Why that career?" "Because I know what it's like to feel invisible." Sujin wrapped her hands around her warm mug. "In foster care, I moved around a lot. Different homes, different schools. Most teachers didn't bother learning my name because they knew I wouldn't be there long. But there was one Mrs. Patterson who saw me, really saw me. She made me feel like I mattered, like my thoughts and dreams were worth hearing. She's the reason I became a teacher. To be for other kids what she was for you." "Exactly. Every child deserves to feel seen and valued, especially the ones who have been overlooked." Minjun was quiet for a moment. "Haewon talks about you constantly. Her English has improved dramatically, but more than that, she's happier, more open. I haven't seen her like this since." He stopped. "Since her mother died." "Yes," he met her eyes. "You've given her something I couldn't, a sense that the world isn't just loss and fear, that there are still people who show up and care without needing anything in return." "I do care about her, very much." "I know, that's what makes this complicated." Sujin's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "You're leaving soon. Back to your life in Atlanta, your husband, your job. And Haewon will lose someone else she's come to depend on. I should have thought of that before I let this happen." "Minjun, connections don't have to end just because geography changes. We can video call, exchange letters. Kids are resilient." "Are they? Or do we just tell ourselves that because it's easier than admitting we've failed them?" The pain in his voice was palpable. Sujin reached across the table and took his hand. "You haven't failed anyone. You're doing your best in an impossible situation. And yes, Haewon will be sad when I leave, but she'll also have had these weeks of friendship and fun and feeling cared for. That doesn't disappear just because I'm not physically here." His hand tightened around hers. "How did you get so wise?" "Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy." He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his whole face. "I should probably try that." "You definitely should. But in the meantime, focus on what you can control. Be present with your daughter. Let her see you're not going anywhere. I had dinner with her last night. Just us, no phones. We played a board game afterward. And it was terrifying and wonderful. She beat me at chess and was so proud of herself. I'd forgotten how competitive she is, how funny, how much of her mother is in her. Sujin squeezed his hand. Keep doing that, those moments add up. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Sujin was acutely aware that they were still holding hands, that neither of them had pulled away. There was nothing inappropriate about it, nothing that crossed lines, but there was an intimacy that made her breath catch. She was married, she reminded herself, happily married to a good man. This was just friendship, just gratitude and circumstance. But when Min-jun finally left that night, she sat for a long time staring at her wedding ring, wondering why her heart felt so confused. The breakthrough came on her 12th day at the estate. Sujin woke to find Haewon standing beside her bed, tears streaming down her face. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Sujin sat up quickly, reaching for the girl. "I had a bad dream, about Mommy, and I went to Appa, but he was on a work call and I didn't want to bother him and I just..." The words tumbled out between sobs. "I miss her. I miss her so much and I can't remember her voice anymore, and what if I forget everything?" Sujin pulled her into bed and held her close, letting her cry. "It's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad. Your mommy loved you so much, and that love doesn't go away just because you can't hear her voice." "But what if I forget?" "Then we'll help you remember. We'll look at pictures and videos. We'll ask your daddy to tell you stories about her. Memory isn't just in our heads, it's in our hearts. Your mother is part of you, Haewon. You carry her with you always." They stayed like that for a long time, Haewon gradually calming as Sujin stroked her hair and hummed a lullaby her own adoptive mother used to sing. Eventually, the little girl fell back asleep, curled against Sujin's side. That's how Min-jun found them an hour later. He'd come looking for his daughter in a panic, only to discover her safe and sleeping peacefully. The look on his face when he saw them together was complex, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper that Sujin couldn't quite name. "She had a nightmare," Sujin whispered, "about her mom." Min-jun nodded, his throat working. "She gets them sometimes. Usually she just cries herself back to sleep. I hear her through the baby monitor, but I never know what to say." "Come here," Sujin gestured to the other side of the bed. "Lie down with us." "I shouldn't." "Min-jun, your daughter needs you. She needs to wake up and see that her father is here, that you're not going anywhere. Stop being scared and just be her dad." He hesitated, then kicked off his shoes and carefully lay down on the other side of Haewon. The little girl stirred, felt her father beside her, and without waking, snuggled against him. Min-jun's eyes filled with tears. "I haven't held her like this since she was 3, he whispered. "I was so afraid of doing it wrong, of making the pain worse. The only wrong thing is not being here." They lay there in the early morning light, Haewon safe between them, and something fundamental shifted. Later, Sujin would think of this as the moment when they stopped being strangers thrown together by circumstance and became something else. Something that didn't have a name but felt like family. Dr. Choi gave Sujin permission to fly home 2 weeks after the initial incident. "Baby is thriving, your blood pressure is normal, and you've followed instructions perfectly. But I want you to take it easy. No stress, plenty of rest. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." The news should have made Sujin happy, but instead, she felt a profound sadness. Leaving meant saying goodbye to Haewon, to Mrs. Kim's morning smiles, to the peaceful garden outside her window, to Min-jun. He took her to dinner at a quiet restaurant the night before her flight. Not the Gangnam Palace where they'd first met, but a small, family-owned place in Bukshan, where the owner greeted him like an old friend. "I used to come here with my wife," he explained as they settled into a private room. "It's where I proposed to her, actually. I haven't been back since she died. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for making it possible for me to come back. I've been avoiding so many places, so many memories. You helped me see that running from the past doesn't honor it." Over grilled fish and banchan, they talked about everything and nothing. Minjun told stories about his courtship with his wife, laughing at his own awkwardness. Sujin shared more about her childhood, about the loneliness and the joy of finally finding her adoptive family. They avoided talking about tomorrow, about the goodbye looming between them. Finally, over dessert, Minjun pulled out an envelope. "I have something for you." Inside were papers for a charitable foundation. "The Haewon Foundation for Educational Excellence," Sujin read aloud. "Minjun, what is this?" "I'm establishing a foundation to support educational programs for underprivileged children, with a focus on foster care and adoption. I want you to be a founding board member. You'd help guide the mission, choose which programs to fund. You can do it remotely from Atlanta, and we'd fly you here twice a year for board meetings." Sujin stared at the papers, overwhelmed. This is incredible. "It's selfish, actually. It gives me an excuse to stay in touch with you, to keep you in Haewon's life, in my life." He paused. "If you want that." "Of course I want that. But Minjun, this foundation will help thousands of kids. That's not selfish. That's extraordinary. I learned from the best." He smiled at her, and she saw how much he'd changed in 3 weeks. The cold, dismissive man from the restaurant had been replaced by someone open and warm and genuinely trying. The goodbye the next morning was harder than Sujin expected. Haewon cried and made her promise to video call every week. Mrs. Kim pressed homemade snacks into her hands for the flight. Even Mrs. Song, usually so stoic, teared up. Minjun drove her to the airport himself. In the departure terminal, before she went through security, he pulled her into a hug that lasted a few seconds too long to be merely friendly. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for saving my daughter, for saving me." "You saved me too. I came to Seoul alone and scared, and I'm leaving with a family I didn't know I needed." He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. "You'll call when you land." "I promise. And you'll take care of yourself, you and the baby." "Yes, doctor," she smiled through her tears. "You take care of Haewon, be the father I know you can be." "I will, because of you I know how." Walking away from him was one of the hardest things Sujin had ever done. But as the plane lifted off over Seoul, she felt not sadness but gratitude. She'd come to this city as a stranger and was leaving as someone forever changed. 3 months later, back in Atlanta with a healthy baby boy named Isaiah, Sujin video called Haewon every Sunday morning. The little girl would introduce her to new friends, show off improved English skills, and chatter about her father, who had started eating dinner with her every night and even took Saturdays off from work. Minjun usually appeared at the end of these calls, asking about Isaiah, about Sujin's return to teaching, about her life. The foundation had launched successfully, and Sujin found herself deeply involved in selecting programs and mentoring initiatives. They'd created something beautiful together, a legacy that would outlive them all. On the 6-month anniversary of the choking incident, a package arrived at Sujin's door. Inside was a framed photo of that first night in the hospital. Sujin asleep in the bed, Haewon curled beside her with her drawings, Minjun standing in the doorway watching them both. Someone, probably Mrs. Song, had captured the moment without them knowing. The note with it was simple. "The day our family began, with love and gratitude, Minjun and Haewon." Sujin hung it in Isaiah's nursery, where she could see it every day. A reminder that sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect, and sometimes we save each other. Years later, when journalists would ask Minjun about the dramatic changes in his company culture, the diversity initiatives, the educational programs, he would smile and say, "I learned from a teacher who saved my daughter's life that real wealth isn't measured in money, but in the connections we make and the lives we touch. She taught me that opening your heart, even when you're terrified, is the bravest thing you can do." And when Haewon grew up and became a teacher herself, specializing in children from difficult backgrounds, she would tell her students about the pregnant woman who saved her life and then stayed to save her father's heart. "Family," she would say, "isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when it matters, about loving despite fear, about being changed by the people brave enough to see past our walls. The story that began with a choking child in a Seoul restaurant became a legacy of transformation, proving that a single act of courage can ripple outward in ways we never imagine, touching lives across continents and generations. Sometimes the most profound changes start with the simplest choice: to help a stranger, to stay when it's easier to leave, to open your heart when every instinct tells you to protect it. Sujin made that choice, and it changed 3 lives forever. Minjun made that choice too, and it turned his wealth into something that truly mattered. And Haewon, witnessing it all, learned that love isn't about perfection but about showing up again and again, even when you're scared. That's the real story. Not about a dramatic rescue or a transformation from prejudice to acceptance, though those things happened. It's about how broken people can heal each other if they're brave enough to try. How a chance encounter can become a chosen family. How the walls we build to protect ourselves often become the prisons that keep us from living fully. If you've stayed with this story until the end, thank you. These are the tales that matter most, not of heroes and villains, but of real people struggling to be better, to love more openly, to forgive themselves and others. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the walls you've built or the strangers you've judged too quickly, then it's done its job. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's built walls around their heart, someone who thinks they're too broken to be loved, someone who's forgotten that families can be chosen, that change is possible, that one act of courage can echo across a lifetime. And if you believe in second chances, in the power of compassion to transform lives, in the beauty of unlikely connections, hit that subscribe button. Share your own stories of unexpected connections in the comments below. Let's build a community that believes in the power of showing up for each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because that's what Sujin, Minjun, and Haewon taught us. That the best families are the ones we choose, the deepest changes come from opening our hearts, and sometimes, saving someone else is how we save ourselves. If this story of transformation, unexpected connection, and courageous compassion moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories that prove people can change and love can heal even the deepest wounds. Drop a comment telling us, would you have the courage to help a stranger in crisis, even while facing your own struggles? Could you see past prejudice to find genuine friendship in the most unexpected places? Share this story with anyone who needs to be reminded that strength and kindness aren't opposites, they're partners. That broken hearts can open again. That families are built through choice, not just blood. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more loved than you imagine. See you in the next story, warriors.